Hello, everybody. So, welcome to this is chapter 5 in the OpenStax textbook. It is actually our third topic for the semester, but this is chapter 5 in the digital OpenStax textbook. This chapter is socialization. So, the way I like to introduce the topic of socialization is sort of in the sequence of the other topics that we've talked about. So, chapter 1 was this perspective that we were going to be looking at society. Chapter 2 was what society was. And then chapter 3, or this third topic, is the process of creating society. So, socialization, I don't think I have it on the quiz anymore. Socialization is a verb. It is the process of internalizing one's culture. It is a little bit different than socializing. Socializing is when we spend time with people. Socialization is the process of learning about our culture. So it's the internalization of a society. It is a lifelong process. So socialization begins, I would argue, before you're born, because you begin to learn about your mother's voice. You learn about the world in the womb, and it continues until our death. I sometimes will have a topic, a slide about the different stages of life, and I sometimes call death the final frontier, the very last stage. Socialization is the process of passing on a culture from one generation to the next generation. So it links them up because we learn about our society from our parents and our grandparents. And by doing this, we preserve our culture. We pass on the one culture to another culture. Now, there's changes along the way. I mean, talk to any old person and they'll tell you that younger people are different, right? I'm constantly having to interpret between my mother, who's 76, and my daughter, who's 24. They just don't understand each other. So it connects generation. It is what we call a kind of social reproduction. This is a very important word here. Social reproduction. Social reproduction is a fancy way of saying we repeat it. So patterns that get socially reproduced are things like, well, one pattern, one phenomena is divorce. The data suggests that if your parents are divorced, you're more likely to be divorced. So that would be an example of we learned something from a previous generation. Political identity is often socially reproduced. We commonly share the same political identity as our parents. Religious identification. If you grow up in a Catholic household, the odds that you will raise your children Catholic are the same. Ideals about life, right? If you grow up in a liberal home versus a conservative home, those are things that get reproduced. Now, when we talk about, I don't think it's discussed in this particular textbook, but it's also when we think about the social structure, and you've seen me draw this on other slides, the triangle, right? I think you've seen me draw the triangle where people are all scattered throughout. Even this structure gets reproduced. So when we talk about structural reproduction, it means that if you grow up in a working class home, and the odds are that you are a working class adult, you have reproduced the structure. Oh, here's a good example. Education, right? I grew up in a home where the adults were educated, and so I'm also educated. Now, I think college educated. I think that'll probably not pass on to the next generation. Okay, social reproduction. It's a very important term. Socialization is different, right? So the way boys learn about the world is a little different than the way girls learn about the world. The way people of color, what they learn about the world, what their parents teach them, the tools that they need to be successful are different from one group to another group. We'll talk throughout the rest of the chapter, throughout the rest of the semester, really, about how race, class, and gender, right, and will influence the way you see the world and the way you work in the world. So poor people, children who grow up in a poor home, will learn different things than children who grow up in a wealthy home. So it is different for different groups, right? Religious homes versus non-religious homes. And then finally, socialization. I don't think it's this one, it's not mentioned very much in your textbook either, but I think it's a really important idea. And it also works very nicely to tie the social sciences or the behavioral sciences, psychology and sociology together. And socialization also includes what we would call the socialization about emotions. We learn about our emotions from our parents, from whatever group, but as we grow up, we learn to identify that particular feeling state. Oh, when the preschool teacher says, "Sarah, you're angry, but you're not. I know you're angry, but you shouldn't go around and hit Johnny." Right? The preschool teacher has labeled your emotion and has told you how you're supposed to express. Now, this is similar but different than what we learn in psychology. Okay, so socialization, different than socializing, internalizing society, a lifelong process of learning, how cultures are preserved, connects generations, different depending on which group you're in, includes how we learn about emotions, and it results in social reproduction, that structure and the similar patterns of culture getting passed on from one generation to another generation. I'm going to stop here.